My name is Chris, and today we're taking a look at the top of Goldring's phono cartridge line. Welcome to the Vinyl Attack. When looking at phono cartridges these days, it seems there are more choices than ever, which can make navigating the hi-fi landscape increasingly difficult. More and more reputable companies are popping up, while many mainstays in the industry are upping their game to compete. Either way, this bodes well for us. I won't go into detail about the long, storied history of the Goldring company here, as I covered in my E3 review, but with over 100 years in the audio industry, they've certainly earned their stripes. The Ethos, the company's top-of-the-line model, aims to show people just how Goldring has been able to stay relevant that long while luring in new and old vinyl enthusiasts alike. Goldring are calling the Ethos, which comes in at around $1,500 retail, a vital line contact stylus, which is to say it's their take on a line contact stylus. Since there aren't really industry standards on the line contact styli, the key takeaway here is that this stylus is shaped with a wide front face and a narrow side profile to not only fit particularly well into the grooves of your records, but to reduce tip mass for increased tracking. The cantilever is an aluminum alloy tube connected to a cross-shaped Swedish iron armature, which is consistent with Goldring's philosophy that this shape promotes improved stereo imaging and less crosstalk amongst the channels. This is all suspended by a bespoke butyl rubber damper pad to keep the entire inner assembly stable during the loudest and most complex passages, leading to less distortion. A neodymium magnet is employed, which the company claims is set to a perfectly uniform magnetic field gap, which gives the Ethos a flat and extended frequency response. You'll find all the aforementioned parts housed in an aircraft-grade aluminum body that keeps the mass low and dissipates unwanted resonance to the tone arm. That's all well and good, but what does all that fancy component talk actually mean? Essentially, Goldring are saying that the stylish shape fits the grooves incredibly well to extract detail, which is in turn sent to their custom-designed armature that achieves superior stereo imaging. The damper pad keeps things stable as the magnet reads the vibrating information being sent, and the futuristic-looking body wraps it all up in style. Fantastic. But does all that actually happen? Well, I can say with certainty that the parts shown and listed are indeed the parts used, so what I think it boils down to is, does that fancy component talk do the job that Goldring says it does? On the whole, I think it does. While I played a number of records during my time with Ethos, I came back to a few in particular to mentally measure the performance of the cartridge. The latest UHQR pressing of Miles Davis's Kind of Blue made its way back into the mix, and perhaps the first thing I noticed was how lively this cartridge is. The horns were particularly energetic in this remastered classic, and I'd expect nothing less from a cartridge that makes the claims that the Ethos does. As I listened on, and again over time, my first impressions made way for the other details that prevented themselves, like the touted channel separation. Because of the way jazz albums were recorded in the golden age of the genre, channel separation is key. Depending on the size of the band, you'll almost always have certain instruments in certain places. For example, the drums take up the right side, while the bass is over on the left, unless there's a piano. Then the piano is on the left, and the bass is more in the middle. The variety of horns are up front, and range and placement from right to left dependent upon the performer or the recording engineer's preferences. So with this style of recording, it's a perfect opportunity to see how wide the soundstage is and how well the channel separation performed. The Ethos didn't disappoint in either of the aforementioned areas. I was treated to each instrument being in its own space while blending superbly with the rest of the ensemble for the entirety of the record. I found Jimmy Cobb's ride cymbal in particular to be quite impressive, and this wasn't the last album with which I'd have that experience. The toms had character, and the double bass, played by Paul Chambers, showed its acoustic nature in warmth and articulation while still having a low end to fill out the band's sound. On the whole, the Ethos was very impressive with a wide range of sounds and tones, and everything sounded natural. It's how you would expect these instruments to sound. But man cannot live on jazz alone, so I brought out another high-quality pressing standard in my collection, Stevie Ray Vaughan's Couldn't Stand the Weather, as mixed and pressed by MoFi on their one-step pressing super vinyl. People have spoken at length about SRV's tone, including myself, but there's damn good reason for that. The magic in his amp, his guitar, and his hands are something of legend. I was quickly reminded of this when I heard it played back to me again, this time with the Goldring Ethos. It was as it should be, full of body, energy, and more soul than a James Brown concert. The bending of strings, the sound of the pick attack, the muted percussive strums, the fierce tremolo notes, all of it sounded like a Fender Strat through a Fender amp should sound. Again, it was just natural, and I don't think it can be overstated or overappreciated. The tight snap of Chris Layton's snare drum was absolutely captivating, locking down the timing and sounding crisp and authoritative while doing so. The punch of his kick drum and the tone of his toms filled the room, while the low end of Tommy Shannon's bass guitar drove everything home in a steady, solid fashion. From the top end to the low bottom, the Ethos was more than capable in every facet. But when I really want to test a product's ability to reproduce texture and tone when it comes to bass, there's one name that tends to rise above them all: King's X. Whether you like the band or you're wrong, you simply cannot deny that Doug Pinnick's bass tone is a league of its own. It's lush, it's full, rich, harmonious, gritty, and endlessly deep, and that's just with his 4-string. Everything goes to 11 when he ironically plugs in his signature 12-string bass. The seamless pairing of the Ethos with my EAT Eagle Petite, yes, that review is still forthcoming, Buchart S400 Mark II speakers connected to the Buchart i150 integrated amp, and my SVS 3000 micro subwoofer, I'm a bit amazed that my neighbors didn't call the police. I think items in their houses are rattling with the low end emanating from this setup. That's not to say that the ferocious tone of Ty Tabor's guitar was overlooked. Far from it. The wide soundstage of his double-track guitar was on full display, and this isn't even what you would call a quality pressing. No, this was a record store day release on orange vinyl of all things, and yet I still couldn't keep from turning everything up. The extended decay of drummer Jerry Gaskell's ride cymbal, once again, coupled with his percussive ping when struck, were simply stellar. It was clean, clear, and sparkling with an emphasis on the latter. As I've mentioned before, I think drums are an often overlooked instrument when it comes to the performance of a product, but they would be hard to miss here. Vocal harmonies, which are plenty with this band, were as full and lush as perhaps anything that I've heard from any cartridge near this price range. The high-end performance from what is pretty much a mid-quality pressing made me realize that I should do a bit more listening to some poorer quality recordings to see how vocals would sound there. Realizing that I need more female vocalists in my record collection, I pulled out what I had on hand, which was Juliana Hatfield's latest release, Blood. While this recording isn't bad, it's a limited edition release that is a clear splatter mix, which made for a bit of a noisy pressing. Thankfully, when the music was playing, this was much less noticeable. Her vocals, of which I am a fan, still sounded fantastic here, even though some of the songs employed a lo-fi, dirty sound to them. Fortunately, the Ethos didn't highlight these sonic characteristics, and the album was still very enjoyable. I did tend to reduce the volume on these songs that contain the effects, though, as they do tend to grind on me after a short while. Even so, her unmistakable voice and impressive range sounded open and sincere. The upper mids were smooth, and the engaging top end never got harsh. The subtle attack of a pick strumming an acoustic guitar was audible, even amongst a plethora of other instruments also playing and voices singing. This is an outstanding sign of balance and detail, and again, the Ethos never flinched. Thinking about my Hana ML and how its performance measured against the Goldring, I mainly felt that the Ethos had a bit more of a sweeter sound. It was certainly a bit more lively, even though I'd say the detailed performances were on par. This isn't all too surprising though, as Japanese cartridges, and Hana in particular, are known for being well-balanced and polite in nature. But, as balanced as the Hana is, I'd say the Ethos was just as much. I did find that there was a bit more texture in the low end in the Ethos. The Hana went equally low, but with its more measured approach to sound, it wasn't quite as exciting in some of the King's X songs. Were I to not play them one and then another, I probably wouldn't have noticed, but if a low end with bite is something you're after, the Ethos might be what you're looking for. Output, weight, and construction are fairly similar between the two, but the design philosophy clearly comes from two different angles. The Hana can certainly rock and roll, but the Ethos is rock and roll. Then again, the Ethos can do balance and neutral, but the Hana is balance and neutral. So, as with everything, if you're contemplating either of these cartridges, you'll need to think about what suits your listening styles best. All that being said, did I find any drawbacks to the Ethos? Really only one. Well, and a half I think, but I'll explain. The one thing is that it's tricky to set up. With its demanding stylish shape, making sure this cartridge is aligned properly is paramount to its performance. If you're coming from a conical, or more likely a run-of-the-mill shaped elliptical, this shape will command your full attention in being set up. Once that's done, of course, you'll be well rewarded, but know that this is not a plug-and-play device. The half thing, if that's what I'm going to call it, and apparently I am, is the shape of the body. While I definitely dig it, I can see some saying that it's just too modern from them. It's too narrow, it's aluminum, and it's unconventional. But considering what you get from the Ethos, I'd say you might want to look past this if this is your only hang-up. So, all my money on the table, who would I go with, the Hana or the Ethos? That's a really tough question, and I don't know that I have an answer. I've had the Hana for quite a while now, and I'm just very happy with its performance. But it's easy to be coaxed with the new shiny toy on the block, especially when it sounds this good. And the Ethos does sound that good. The exciting performance that isn't over the top in any area would go well with any style of music that you might have on hand. In the $1,500 range, it's getting harder and harder to pick a clear standout when it comes to cartridges. If that's the bad news, and it isn't, the good news is that with competition this tough, you'll also have a hard time picking something that you won't like. The Ethos stands pretty damn tall in that group. Thanks to all of my patrons on Patreon who support this channel. Thanks to you for stopping by to watch, and I look forward to next time.